Hello, cooking enthusiasts. This week's video is sort of a follow-up to my last video in which I made a hazelnut paste from scratch. As I mentioned in that video, that is a project I don't expect many to do themselves. However, this is a recipe you could do with a store-bought or homemade nut butter. So this video is called Hazelnut Panna Cotta, but you can apply this to any sort of similar spread. The important thing is the recipe template linked in the video description. The link includes a built-in calculator in which the important parameter is the sugar percentage of your nut butter slash spread. Obviously, a lot of stuff is unsweetened, but that isn't always the case. By inputting the sugar level of the nut butter, it adjusts the sweetener content of the recipe. This is also important because there are multiple options for what you can use as sweetener. There's regular sugar, honey, and maple syrup. All of the numbers given in the recipe table are used to achieve the same final sweetness as using just regular sugar. It's also important to note that using honey or maple syrup will adjust the amount of water needed in the recipe. Just a few other notes about this initial footage you are seeing. When using honey or maple syrup, like I am using in this footage, I use some of the already measured water to sort of rinse the container with the sweetener to make sure I get everything. At this stage, everything else is going directly on top of the nut butter that was measured. This includes gum arabic, which might be unnecessary, but I am using as a emulsifier while the gelatin in the recipe sets. This is also where you could add a pinch or a measured amount of salt, but my homemade hazelnut butter was pretty well seasoned. And of course, we are blooming the rest of the gelatin in the rest of the water. As always, if you've ever worked with gelatin, it's important to let it bloom for several minutes in cool water before dissolving it. For such a small quantity, the easiest way to do this is really just in the microwave using 45 all the way down to 20-second bursts as it begins to warm up. My target temperature range is between 60 and 70 Celsius. The gelatin does start dissolving around 50 Celsius, but I want to make sure it's really thoroughly dissolved and also doesn't immediately begin setting once we start blending it with the rest of our more room temperature ingredients. Back to the footage. Once the gelatin is thoroughly dissolved, it gets poured into the rest of the ingredients, which are beginning to be blended with an immersion blender, it's important to really blend thoroughly without breaking the surface of the mixture too much, because you don't want too much air incorporated into the panna cotta. And what you might not be able to see in the footage is that we're really using the sides of the immersion blender to really scrape any of that hazelnut butter from the sides of the vessel and make everything as homogeneous as possible. From there, it's just about pouring the mixture into vessels of your choice, in this case, ramekins, and especially some of the last mixture you pour may have bubbles on it, and it's important to just gently scrape those off. A very quick detour in this video is some footage you are seeing here. Of course, I couldn't leave well enough alone, and while the other panna cottas were beginning to set, I made a mini batch of the same mixture, but with a little bit of added chocolate. I was essentially using the maple syrup version of my recipe, but replaced a little bit of the hazelnut butter with dark chocolate. This was really just to make a cool, layered presentation that I wanted to show off for the video, but it didn't quite turn out how I was hoping. Still, I thought I would still point this out because it is a fun concept. You could even layer multiple different flavors of my recipe, or layer the nut-based panna cotta with a classic dairy panna cotta. Now we skip ahead to over 24 hours later when the panna cotta has fully set. I'll be completely honest, we did not do a great job of presenting these panna cottas, and we used hot water to try and gently remove them from the ramekins, but they ended up melting on the outside and creating a puddle. I think really the ideal solution is to use silicone molds that you can flex in order to push the panna cotta out of the vessel. Otherwise, using an actual small bowl with curved sides, I think that would allow it to pop out a little easier without any melting. I'll have an image on screen of a pretty nice presentation we did with a previous batch of this panna cotta mixture. Our presentation skills aside, it is a recipe I'm really happy with. The flavor is really delicious, and again, I think it's a great template for working with any kind of nut-based spread. It is also a great dairy-free option, and even ignoring that, it's a simple, delicious recipe, easy to scale. Making it completely vegetarian or vegan friendly would require some more adjusting. I wouldn't replace gelatin with agar, which a lot of recipes usually do, but instead look at carrageenan. or something like Modernist Pantry's vegan gelatin replacement. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video and the recipe. Please let me know if you try it and with what kind of nut spread you use. Otherwise, thank you for watching.